Among the elder races, renowned for their engineering skills and stubbornness, the dwarves were the most hard to understand. Their society was fraught with dilemmas. Despite having little inclination towards magic, they produced magical artifacts. Their technological progress, which had been advancing at an exceptionally rapid pace, would suddenly come to a halt for decades, then resume like it had never even stopped. They constantly oscillated between traditionalism and innovation, and whilst they did not devote their souls to their gods, ritualistic behaviours were frequently observed in dwarf society. Even they had forgotten how their stories began, but of course no one dared to forget the dawn of the false sun. When the Keporath invasion began, in the 3rd millennium BC, the dwarves took refuge in the mountains under the leadership of a Multan. Multans were a rare type of dwarf, born with a genetic defect, possessing a congenital obsession with mechanical structures, shorter lifespans than other dwarves, somewhat diminished emotional capacity, and often heterochromia. They were markedly different from their kin. And until the invasion, these innovative, open-minded and curious folk were nothing but a nuisance. Unwanted and outcast, they found no place for them in tradition-centred dwarven society. For a dwarf of that era, inventing a machine to chop wood, instead of going there and using an axe with his own hands, was considered little short of blasphemy. Doing such a thing would only bring shame upon his ancestors. It is therefore hardly surprising that most dwarves despised the Moltons, who were forever attempting to invent new devices and discover new ways of doing things. But after witnessing the fall of their countless brethren, they accepted the path of a Molton, Bormund Skygazer. His path no longer seemed any more foolish than the alternatives, so dwarves from far and near heeded his words. First they set off toward the mountains, and then they continued deeper still. Their trust in Bormund Skygazer blinded them briefly, but long enough to change their ways. They made him king, and started to see Moltans as chosen people, destined to bring light to the darkness into which they had descended. What became a scar upon the memory of most races marked the beginning of a new era for the dwarves. Moltans were placed in positions of authority, and with their contraptions the dwarves suddenly compressed years of labour into mere weeks. The prosperities they brought was short-lived, however. Moltans were undoubtedly capable, but they lacked certain qualities necessary for rulership. Dwarves who wished to return to their traditions began voicing concerns about a system that pressed relentlessly forward without considering where it was heading. Those concerns became uprisings in no time. After a couple of centuries, the dwarves once again found themselves on the brink of collapse. This time, however, they adopted a system of two kings, one for tradition and one for innovation. They did not rule together, nor did they plot against one another. One ruled until failure. The other waited without haste. For dwarves, rulership was not a divine right, but a divine debt to be repaid. They staggered and continued, time and time again. In either, they were so beyond others, magic was the only comparison to their contraptions. The elves had long dominated the battlefield, and their unmatched military prowess stemmed from a simple truth. When one fought the elves, one fought the land itself. Forests bent to their will, valleys became traps, and even the wilderness seemed eager to destroy their enemies. For this reason, the elves assumed the dwarves, hidden within their mountain strongholds, would be easy prey. All they needed to do was command the spirits of the mountains to crush them. When the mountains answered their call, the dwarven halls endured. Caverns collapsed, tunnels cracked, and stone groaned under impossible strain, yet the great structures at the heart of their kingdoms remained standing. To the elves, to the architects of the world, this was incomprehensible. They had spent centuries mastering the forces of nature and shaping the world through enchantment, yet here stood works that defied the will of a mountain spirit without a single spell being cast. Ever since that day, the dwarves have remained the elves' greatest rivals. The elves would face greater dangers in the centuries that followed, and more than once their very existence would hang in the balance. Yet no enemy challenged them in such a fundamental way. Dwarven custom forbade the exchange of unprocessed metal, regarding it as a sin. To them, the veins of ore that run through the mountains were the resting place of their ancestors. Unlike many races, the dwarves were never particularly devoted to their gods. Likewise, unlike many deities, the dwarven gods hungered little for worship. This left them weaker than many gods, and in some cases even less powerful than few mortal sorcerers. As a result, their souls rarely reached the divine realms to empower the gods after death. Yet even when a dwarven soul did find its way into a god's domain, it was seldom kept. When a dwarven soul reached their halls, they did not consume it for power as other gods might. Instead, they placed it upon celestial anvils and forged it anew. They would forge them into weapons, armour, tools, and treasures, returning them to the mortal world to aid the friends and family left behind. The gods did not permit their greatest smiths to rest. When a legendary blacksmith died, his soul was said to be carried to the celestial forges. The finest relics born of this practice were reputed to possess an extraordinary blessing. For 7 years, no weapon lacking enchantment or bearing a lesser soul could leave so much as a dent upon these armours. Dwarves were widely regarded as a stubborn and proud people, and many considered them deeply prejudiced toward outsiders. They often greeted strangers with suspicion, and few races were as difficult to earn the trust of. Yet no race showed greater respect for skill and accomplishment. To a dwarf, talent commanded admiration, regardless of whether it belonged to a friend or a foe. As a result, despite their long-standing disagreements with the elves, the dwarves remained one of the most influential races within the guild. Their expertise in countless disciplines earned them a voice that even their rivals could not ignore.